Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you guys so much for being here. I know that there is a coffee break right after this, so we're going to try to keep this as informative as possible so we can all look forward to getting that last hit of caffeine before the end of the afternoon. My name is Patrick Vo. I'm the president and CEO of BioTrack THC. BioTrack THC, we kind of co-founded the seed-to-sale software space. In fact, back in 2010, here in Denver at the Plant Medicine Expo, BioTrack, along with a few other software companies, first unveiled the full kind of seed-to-sale concept, where an individual plant would be registered in the system and would follow the record of that plant through the entire supply chain, through manufacturing, all the way to retail point of sale. So BioTrack, we're one of the oldest and most experienced in this particular space, both the entire supply chain from end to end, as well as from coast to coast across multiple states and even on the international stage. Not only do we provide seed-to-sale tracking for the licensed businesses, we also provide the same technology to government regulators. We currently hold 9 government contracts. 3 of them have been up for renewal as of recent, and we got those renewals. We've also been the only ones who successfully deployed a private traceability system for a cannabis jurisdiction. Specifically, these cannabis businesses were already up and running, they were operating, and a situation happened in which they needed to basically report their tracking data with manual spreadsheets directly to the regulator, which would have been an absolute disaster. And so we stepped in and we basically stood up a private version of our regulatory platform in order for them to be able to continue to report. The system itself would generate the spreadsheets on their behalf and send those off to the regulator. BioTrack also is the first, and to my knowledge, the only seed-to-sale software firm that a former Washington Attorney General and 2 Deputy Attorney Generals legally opined that it was Cole Memo compliant. And even though the Cole Memo may or may not hold a lot of weight at the moment, at least with respect to that bar, to that standard, that was something that was very important milestone in the software space for us to hit. And then finally, we were the first to deploy in a FedRAMP authorized environment, a government seed-to-sale system, and the first to complete an industry standard SOC 2 audit. Now, for our presentation here today, we believe you're here because you play a role. You play a vital role in either launching your county, your state, your country's cannabis program, or you're responsible at least for its continued iteration and evolution. I can definitely say, and I'm sure everybody here can understand, there's passion on both sides. There are the free the weed folks, and there are also still the staunch prohibitionists. And oftentimes, especially in your shoes, it's very easy to feel like you are in a Kobayashi Maru. You're in a no-win situation. I'm trying to launch a program, we're trying to launch a program, and we have no resources, no financial backing, and we have an impossible timeline. So if you want to focus on the quality of your execution, and you end up missing the deadline, you're going to end up with furious patients. You're going to end up with furious businesses that have invested money and are waiting to finally start generating revenues. You're going to have furious politicians. Why is the system not up and running? Conversely, if you focus only on hitting a deadline, but the system, your deployment is messy, you're going to have long lines. You're going to have businesses writing transactions down still by pen and paper. So you're going to have furious patients. You're going to have furious business owners. You're going to have furious politicians. And so the point of this entire symposium and what we're hoping to achieve in this particular talk is to share our experiences, share what successes we have seen in prior deployments, honestly, what mistakes we've made and what failures came out of those things, the lessons learned, the unintended consequences. And we at BioTrack, we're thankful for the opportunity here today to share some of our own experiences with you and to help you avoid your department being splattered into the news for all of the wrong reasons. So I'm usually not a huge fan of spoilers, but I wanted to make sure that we hit home what are the key takeaways from our talk today. The first key takeaway is that when you are launching a program, or if you're looking to start a new procurement for your next generation system, it is important, it is critical to define your state, your county, your country's needs before even starting the procurement process. This requires working hand in hand with all of the future stakeholders. These procurements should not be developed or designed in a silo or just by taking another state's request for proposal and their requirements, doing a replace all, putting your name in there, and then crossing your fingers and hoping that that's going to be sufficient for your state, for your country, for your county or city. In order for it to be successful, the program as a whole, and we're not talking about just the seed to sale piece, but for the entire thing, engagement with all of the stakeholders, the licensees themselves, or future licensees that the program hasn't launched yet, the laboratories, the patients, what are important to them, and so that way all of their collective needs are incorporated. We've seen time and again these programs falter because they don't incorporate what is important to everyone else. And this does not have to be a zero-sum game where the regulators are winning and the licensees feel oppressed, or the patient, the product is too loose or it's too stringent. All of these things need to be factored in, and if it is a collaborative effort, it better ensures success. The second key takeaway is your confidence in the product delivery itself. Cannabis is already a frontier industry. It is a bleeding edge industry. To the extent that you can reduce that novelty risk to engage with proven products, battle-tested products that have used live data in live environments, and people who have also undergone those same stressors versus being someone's guinea pig, a system that hasn't been used before, a team that is unproven for the task at hand. The third thing is understanding and balancing your go-live priorities. Timeliness versus perfection. Patient access delays, how long to take to put this system together versus making sure that the system is perfect, flawless, and as leak-proof as possible before it goes live. Now, one of the solutions to that, to compromise, is phasing the rollout itself, figuring out ways in which you can segment out what needs to go first for the initial deployment, and then how you can add things as you go that aren't necessarily required for those first stages. Progress is better than waiting for perfection. And in fact, the enemy of progress is perfection. You can sit there for months, for years, and still not get it perfectly down. What's important, though, is to get something that is solid enough where you as regulators can have solid footing to continue moving the program forward. Program improvements and changes. There is a difference between what you need today to launch your program or to make your program successful and what you're going to need 2 years from now. And so keeping those things in mind, understanding your roadmap, where you want to be, and how the current product, the current system, the current vendor fits in, not just with your immediate goals, but with your long-term needs. And then finally, key metrics and defining your program goals. What are you looking for in the data that you're acquiring, and why? So specifically the problem, and real quick, I do want to give a shout out to the state of Delaware. The state of Delaware is in attendance today. I know that we're going to be referencing them specifically as a case study. So if you have any questions afterwards, please feel free to seek out Delaware. I know that they'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. So specifically when it comes to Delaware, part of the problem was initially through their procurement process, they actually selected somebody other than BioTrack THC. And through a long chain of events, which we don't need to go into here, the award was actually rescinded, and then BioTrack, as the runner-up to that procurement, was given the contract for the state of Delaware. Now, unfortunately, it was a double-edged sword because, yes, we won the contract, we were excited to partner with them and to make their program successful, but 5 critical months were lost in the deployment. And we're talking about project management, we're talking about development and customization, we're talking about the quality assurance testing, training, all of that. So now we have a drastically reduced time frame. So how do we better ensure success given the constraints that we have? And again, here's kind of to frame the possibility of failure. If by losing time, patients and businesses all have expectations for a timely go live. These patients, they've waited long enough for their medicine, they need it today, they want it today. These businesses have put a lot of money into starting these businesses. Delaying go live has very significant impact on them as well. And that creates a lot of political pressure. And I don't envy you guys with respect to getting those phone calls from a state legislator, a governor to say, hey, where are we at with this system? And applying a lot of that pressure. So for example, in one of our client states, we were tracking $150 million of cannabis changing hands on a monthly basis. That amounts to $35 million of tax revenue for that state across that month. So every day in which the system was down or delayed resulted in over $1 million of tax revenues on a daily basis. Again, though, nobody cares. You're still expected to go live on time with the resources that you have. So the solution, working hand in hand, again, working with all of the stakeholders, working hand in hand with the state and the licensees, the vendor that you choose, make sure that from a culture perspective, from an attitude perspective, that they approach the project as a partner, not just as a provider. So, we at BioTrack, we're very passionate about this industry, and we care very much. We understand that our success as a private sector firm is dependent upon your success as a regulator. So what that means is sometimes project management, documentation, proper approval processes, all of those have their place, and all of those things are necessary. But sometimes you need a partner who's willing to roll up their sleeves and say, listen, we're going to get this job done. We'll figure out the billing later. We'll figure out, how to fit this into a contract amendment down the road, but we need to do this today. In one of the government contracts that we've recently launched, there was an open question in terms of whether or not something that was required or for go live was actually within the scope of the original contract. Now, our team knows those arguments don't matter in the grand scheme of things, because if there's egg on our customer's face, there's egg on ours as well. So we said, listen, this is required for go live, whether it was documented or not. Let's just do it. Let's get the job done. And then after things settle down, we'll circle back. And so you need a partner who's willing to do that, especially with these impossible timeframes, and not having to worry about, well, the whole program now is delayed because we're waiting on a contract amendment that's going to have to go through a 4-week cycle, even though go live is 2 weeks from now. Understanding your go live priorities. So you've got a lot of different variables that you need to juggle and balance in this process. You need to make sure that the system you select adheres to your rules and regulations. I mean, that's a non-starter. If the system enables businesses to circumvent the actual regulations or rules, or does not allow you to detect those things, that's a problem. Data migration. Is there legacy data or pre-existing data that needs to go from those legacy systems into this new system? And then what are kind of the rank orders? So for example, you don't need to have the dispensary and sales piece completed before you have patients. There's no need to track sales. There will be no sales to track if patients aren't there. So what we can do is we can start breaking up the product life cycle and deploy in stages as necessary to keep up with the actual workflows in the environment. So the first thing is the patient access. How do patients apply for a medical card or to become a participant in the program? From there, we can then separately deploy the seed-to-sale system. And similarly, you don't have to have the entire seed-to-sale system figured out for deployment. You can start with cultivation. There's nothing in the retail stores if cultivation isn't tracking first. So you can start with cultivation. And then shortly after that, include the manufacturing and processing piece. And then after that, include the retail dispensing piece. And so you can use kind of this waterfall approach and open up things as they are actually needed in the real world, so you can still achieve your time frames without having to worry about having everything from end to end buttoned down before you do so. And then finally, the ability to actually then, once you're tracking that data, to be able to use that data, the ability to oversee the market supply chain, have visibility into the activities of the licensees, and you're eliminating the opportunities for the bad actors, both for the product diversion of regulated product out of your regulated system and the inversion of non-regulated product into your system. So again, creating a phased rollout, prioritizing that launch functionality. What do you absolutely have to have by this certain date, and what can you defer 2 weeks later, a month later, a quarter later, a year later? Customization. Finally, once you've done that, it's essential to achieve ongoing improvements, iteration, or iterating the system, so that way the system is more and more valuable to you as time goes on. So specifically when it came to Delaware, we broke it up into those kind of 3 unofficial phases. The first thing that was required was the patient registry. So we got the patient registry up and running within 2 months. Rather than saying, okay, let's wait until the seed-to-sale system is also done, waiting until the legacy data can be migrated, patient registry goes first. Let's get that bottleneck out of the way. And then once we do so, we can then move on to the next stage. Seed-to-sale, 1 month later. And then after the seed-to-sale was up and running and the medical treatment center was connected and reporting, then we could go back and say, let's import some of that legacy data, make sure that legacy data is mapped, so that way there's a kind of a smooth timeline in the supply chain from the data that existed before the system went live to the data we're capturing now after go live. So we were still able to do everything within 5-6 months. But we were able to make those milestone achievements with 2 months, 1 month, 2 months. And then that way we were able to still be timely while at the same time not sacrificing the quality of the system. So execution. Cannabis, it is both wonderful but can be frustrating at the same time because this is a frontier industry. Forgive my language, but there's just a lot of bullcrap when it comes to slick salesmanship, a lot of photoshopping, a lot of slick videos of, oh, hey, here's a software product. There's no code behind it. It's all just mock-ups. Or we've got experience in this other area. And to be fair, there's nothing new under the sun. An industry is an industry. Selling a widget is selling a widget. But there is something that is unique about cannabis business owners, about cannabis customers and patients, about cannabis culture. And those things come into play. Those things are not irrelevant when it comes to deploying systems like these. So having a proven track record for the product and having a proven track record for the team is essential to eliminate those variables that can muck up your deployment and either miss your deadline or you hit your deadline, but the system that you're now relying on and that is a reflection of your execution is a big mess. So can the provider deliver on what's promised? It is essential to do the research before the procurement as well as in the procurement itself in terms of the demonstration to really understand, is there really a software product here, or is it just a facade and they're going to be scrambling once they've won the contract, okay, now we got to deliver. Now we got to build this thing that we said we had, but we don't really. And again, we referenced this earlier, the team culture is very important. Are they, I clock in at 9, I clock out at 5, if you have an emergency at 7:30 in the evening, I'll get back to you tomorrow? Or do they have the same sense of urgency that you do, that listen, all of our collective reputations, our jobs are on the line. both in terms of deploying this thing timely and getting a quality product out there. If they understand that, they give you your cell phone, they say, here's how to reach me any time of the day, any day of the week, and we're in this together, and we're going to make this deadline, and in doing so, we're still going to deploy a quality product. That firsthand experience, so the knowledge, in addition to the attitude, is extremely important. It's one thing to sit here and say, from a textbook definition, okay, I know theoretically the data points I need to track, how to set the system up for it to be secure and not prone to leakage or breach. How do I connect all of these data points from all of these disparate licensees? So we kind of represent that here with the knowledge, all kind of the knowledge that you've got here from a textbook perspective, from a mental perspective. But what's really important is the experience. The experience is able to connect those things together in ways that you didn't know that they connected, with just a head knowledge. And also, you don't know the things that you don't know. Those things come about. Those things reveal themselves through actual experience. If you had asked us back in 2014 when we deployed the state of Washington's government track and trace program for the first time, that, hey, does BioTrack have everything figured out? I would have confidently told you, absolutely, we had it all figured out. And one day later, something happened in Washington where, a licensee is innovating in the area of extraction, or there are, different things going on with respect to transportation licensing or quality assurance tests and laboratories. And I can confidently tell you now, 5 years after the deployment of our very first government system, we still don't have all the answers. But I can tell you that we have learned things over the last half decade that we definitely did not know then, and that we can apply to the problems now, so that way you don't hit your head against the same things that your colleagues in other states or other countries have already run into before. So what resulted? By taking this phased approach, by having this partnership attitude with Delaware and all of these things. So first of all, we launched the system on time. The essential features that were needed for each stage made it to market in the time required. So there was not a whole lot of drama with respect to dispensary lines going out the door because nobody knew what they were doing, or that the system was constantly crashing or going down. We got the basics right, and it was stable. In fact, Hurricane Maria hit 1 month after go live. There was no service interruption as a result of that, because from our prior government contract engagements, we had performed disaster recovery plans, business continuity plans. We put those things together. We actually rehearsed those things, and so we were ready. By the time Maria hit, our Florida office was shut down for almost a full week. But we were able to continue. The system itself remained up and running. Our support staff in our other locations, like here in Denver, in Olympia, Washington, and Hawaii, were standing by ready to assist. And so those things, again, going above and beyond the academic, are critical to success. And then after the initial launch, then multiple phases afterwards to incorporate the additional functionality that we wanted, that we needed, but weren't necessary for the initial launch, and able to add features that were not originally requested, and then some granular customizations that are specific to their needs, which we're going to jump into here in just a moment. Again, maximum visibility. Ultimately, what is this all about? This is about providing you the visibility, the data that you need to make informed decisions, to identify high-risk activities, high-risk licensees that could potentially point to bad actors. And then, of course, also increasing efficiencies, being able to do more with what you have, so that way, again, your organization can be successful. So specifically in terms of some of the customizations, and we made these things immediately available for Delaware, for Department of Health, for law enforcement, in terms of patient status and patient limits. So the patients are able to apply for access to the program. We're able to track their status throughout not only the application, but once they become a participant in the program, track what their status is. Is it live? Is it suspended? Is it currently in renewal? And track the limits for them as well. So I know that here in Colorado, there was an incident not too long ago where there was a chain of dispensaries that were found to basically be participating in looping, where a patient would walk in, get the maximum daily amount that they were allowed to purchase, walk out to the parking lot, put things away, 5 minutes later come right back in and purchase their daily maximum again. Because there was no centralized record keeping, there was no double checking on the regulator's end in terms of what was being sold on a per patient basis. So here we're able to, using the, being able to track patient limits, say swipe their card, they apply 2 ounces to the card. If they try to, again, before their limit is refreshed, the system is going to reject it. And the individual at the point of sale is not going to mistakenly oversell, over-dispense to a patient, or similarly, they're not going to intentionally do so just to make a quick buck. So this is something that we've incorporated not just in Delaware, but in other states as well to prevent that kind of looping. Again, the system allows the state to oversee the supply chain in a snapshot. We then added additional things like ad hoc reporting, integrated laboratory testing, transfer manifests, making sure that product must have passing quality assurance results before it can be placed on a manifest for shipment to the final dispensary. And then finally, real-time data analytics. This here is a photo of Amelia Nunez. She was a New Mexico resident. Before we had deployed our program to New Mexico, she actually became a Colorado medical cannabis refugee. Her family took her here to Colorado to get access to medicine. They moved away from home. But after we had deployed our patient registry and seed-to-sale tracking program, the family was able to come back to their community, and she is the youngest patient ever to receive a medical cannabis card, which she's holding in her hands right there. So kind of a concrete example in terms of how this is valuable and why this is important in terms of uncovering bad actors. So a few months ago, a patient called into the department and inquired about their application status. And so we looked it up, and there was basically an issue, and the department reached out to the physician who had authorized the application. And the physician responded and said, I haven't worked at that facility in months. That signature, whoever's it is, it's not mine. And so that led to questions of who is signing, who's forging this doctor's signature. And so we were able to we looked up the actual scan of the patient's application. A signature was in fact present. So this was not a situation where a paper application got submitted without a signature and that got overlooked. No, it got through because there was a signature, but the signature did not belong to that physician. So a report was pulled that looked up applicants by physician and facility. And and basically it was identified that 135 patients submitted applications with a forged physician's authorization, physician signature. All of that transpired in the span of 3 days. If we were going through everything with manual paper applications and things like that, the time frame to determine and discover those things would have taken a lot longer. So the department was able to then refer that over to the state police. They then, of course, obtained the actual physical records, and long story short, there was a search warrant and arrest for somebody who, in fact, confessed to tampering with these documents, with forging the physician's signature. These patients hadn't even been seen by a doctor, and were able to submit these paper applications with a doctor's signature that wasn't actually legitimate. Above and beyond finding those identifying those high-risk activities, those bad actors, the statistics as well in terms of improving your agency's output, the ability to process things. So obviously one of the major problems or one of the bottlenecks for the industry is how quickly can we get patients approved into the program so that way they can actually make it to the facilities and start purchasing their medicine. So here, just in terms of the statistics we have in Delaware, both prior to launch of our system and then pulled as recently as last month. So in September of 2017, Delaware had roughly 3,500 patient cards issued. Now, keep in mind, it took about 5 years to get to that number. They were processing it, on average, it took about 30 days or a month to process an application. Once an application was complete and approved, it took 10 minutes to print the card itself. It took about a week or 7 days to replace a stolen card, and all of this was done with manual entry. Fast forward to last month, in 1 year, they've now issued a total of over 6,500, so they've almost doubled the number of total cards issued. And keep in mind, this also includes the renewals from the year prior. Because the average processing time dropped from 30 days down to a day and a half to process an application. The printing of the physical card itself dropped from 10 minutes down to 1 minute. And now, in terms of pulling a report to take a look at the data, we can look at it in 24 hours as opposed to a week, and a lost or stolen card can be replaced in 5 minutes as opposed to 7 days. In terms of having the data readily accessible, it's one thing to capture all of this data. It's another thing to have it at your fingertips so that way it's actually relevant to your activity and your decision making. So this is actually pulled from a non-Delaware customer of ours, or former customer, I should say. But if you look on the left, and I know it's probably a little bit hard to see from the back, if you look on the left, it's literally the days, day one of each month all the way to the 31st day. On the left 3 columns, we have the month of September. In the middle 3 columns, we have the month of October. We were, for this customer, we were able to literally pull on a daily basis all of this, the aggregate sales activity, the excise tax due to the state, and the total sales activity and the net sales activity on a daily basis. And they were able to publish this on the website so that way they wouldn't have to adhere to, hundreds of records requests a day for the exact same data. They were able to pull it out, say, here you go, it's published on the website, and they updated it with only a 2-day lag time just to make sure that if there's any last second data that needs to be edited or modified, they had the opportunity to do so. I can confidently say that there's not a whole lot of other software companies that could actually do that, that could make sure that that data is so quickly and readily available to you at that kind of a level. So finally, avoiding the problem in the first place, avoiding running out of time, avoiding deploying on time, but having a messy system. Again, defining your state's current needs, your county, your city, your country. This is an uncharted territory for new programs and even for existing programs. In terms of next steps, where do we go from here? Defining those needs, balancing the need for progress and timeliness with cleanliness in terms of launch is absolutely key. And again, talking to all of your stakeholders, communicating with vendors and licensees prior to the RFP release. So in the state of Washington, for example, they recently, our contract expired just due to circumstances we did not rebid. However, one of the things that was not taken into account was the needs of the licensees that were already operating. And so there was a vendor that was chosen from that procurement process last year that their requirement was to use these RFID tags, radio frequency tags, that the licensees were required to purchase. And the licensees, upon learning that they were the ones that were going to be awarded the contract, pushed back incredibly strongly and said that we're not made of money, we're not, you can see those shows, those TV shows out there showing licensees, with safes full of cash in the back. That's not us. And now you're asking us to, not only pay what we currently pay and incur the costs we already incur, but to throw on an additional $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a year for these one-time use tags that don't add any additional value to the tracking and tracing of the supply chain. We're not paying for that. And also the fact that they are negatively affect the environment for something that they've already had something operating for 4 years up till that point. And it got so loud that the regulator had to take a step back and say, okay, well, the vendor then actually had to withdraw its bid, and then so a runner-up then was then named as the awardee for that contract. So understand, make sure, don't be surprised by the time you get to that point that there's a visceral and emotionally violent pushback from your stakeholders. Make sure that their input is included long before you get to that point. Again, inevitability of change. And our counterparts at Accela had mentioned this in the last presentation, out of the box versus customizable. The system needs to meet 85, 90, 95% of your needs out of the box. We don't have time for the unknowns. We don't have time for new development. We don't have time for the team to figure out how they should be operating in these environments. But the system also needs to be customizable so that way it can meet your future needs. For example, both Illinois and New York are currently, operating medical programs that, we've provided software for them, but now they're both looking into adult use. And so how can we contribute to the launch of yet another program, or at least what you can say is kind of a secondary launch, but still different from the original launch? And so make sure that the system is staying current and able to continue to add value as priorities change. And then finally, again, confidence in product delivery. I cannot stress enough that proven products, proven people is absolutely critical to the success. You've got enough unknown variables as it is. Don't roll the dice by being, someone else's test case to hope that they can, get enough experience this time around on your expense. And it's not just a matter of successful implementation. It's also about continuing to make sure that the program is up and running, it's stable, it's safe and secure long after you've launched. So that is it for our presentation. I want to thank you guys again so much. I hope that you found it helpful. And then just in terms of, kind of some fun statistics, since 2010, we've tracked over 32 million unique plants from coast to coast, both in our business platform as well as our government platforms across the country. $18 billion worth of product tracked throughout the entire supply chain. And over 2,000 licensed facilities from coast to coast, and even some in the international community utilize the software. So we've got a lot of experience in this area, and it's something that I will definitively say we still don't have all the answers, but we can definitely more than happy to be sharing both our successes and our past failures to your benefit for your programs. So thank you guys so much. Open to take questions that you may have. Yes, sir.
So in the current states that you have those contracts with, you're the inventory tracking system and the point of sale as well?
Yes. So not necessarily we are the point of sale system. So in the states in which we have a government contract, we provide the centralized track and trace system for the agency, whether it's the Department of Health, Department of Agriculture. Separately, we still sell business management, inventory management, and point of sale tools to the businesses. It is not required that they use our commercial system. The only thing that is required is that whatever system they do use for their business needs and their business record keeping can integrate with and submit data to the centralized government system.
Wow. Yeah, that's really nice to have in those states, I bet. The other question is, what separates your point of sale system from other systems like FlowHub and JFreeway as well?
So that one's a tough one because clearly I'm going to be incredibly biased. This has been a labor of passion for us for a number of years. I'm gonna just sit here and say that, and rather than go into all the details and multiple bullet points, having been in this industry for as long as we have, having our system be informed by the needs of the government regulators, and having our government system informed by the needs of coming from the licensees, that our system is robust functionality-wise and generally applicable across multiple models in terms of program operations and execution. I'm not going to lie, there are dozens and dozens of point-of-sale systems, of plant tracking systems now compared to where there were back in 2011 or 12. But there are very, very few that are able to sell their commercial software in more than just a handful of states. Maybe they have found their niche in California. Maybe they found their niche in the Pacific Northwest. But to be relevant and applicable across the entire country, and even internationally, is definitely a challenge, because the way Illinois tracks and traces for cannabis is different than the way Hawaii tracks and traces for cannabis, and both of those track and trace cannabis differently than New Mexico. So the breadth of that experience and the breadth of the applicability, I feel, is absolutely key, as a key differentiator, specifically for BioTrack. Thanks. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your attention. Again, very grateful for it. I understand we've got coffee for us to get through the remainder of the afternoon. Thank you again so much for your time, and hope to run into you throughout the rest of the conference. Please enjoy the rest of your time here.